Thank you so much for joining us today for our March Empowered Educator event that is all about saving time. Today we have Audrey Wick from Blinn College here to share her ideas, her hacks for saving time in the classroom, saving more time for you in your course. We hope that you'll be able to engage with us today. As many of you already have, there is a chat box available that you can share your comments with us. So please, throughout the presentation, feel free to share your comments, share your own tips for saving time, and we will be happy to engage there with you. Also, if you have any questions for Audrey, we will be saving some time at the end of the presentation for her to address your questions. So feel free to submit those at any point in the presentation using the Q&A feature, which for most of you, I believe you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Today, again, we're so pleased to have Audrey here with us. Audrey Wick is a full-time English professor at Blinn College in Texas. She has taught developmental English through sophomore level literature courses in a variety of modes, including face-to-face, online, hybrid, video conference, and service learning. Audrey is also a writing teacher who writes, with recent publication in the Chicago Tribune, the Orlando Sentinel, the International Journal of the Book, and a variety of literary journals and blogs. Audrey, thank you so much for taking your time today to be with us.
Well, it is my pleasure, Courtney. We had such fun thinking about this presentation because, and I want to share for the benefit of everybody on the call, how this presentation came to be. Some of you may be familiar with the concept of hacks, the idea that you can save time by shortening a process or doing something in a non-standard way. You may have heard of laundry hacks or cleaning hacks or food hacks. And so there are all these kind of fun ways to save time or get more mileage out of something. So the concept kind of came to be because we were interested in helping other educators save time in the classroom, save time in grading, and hopefully win back some of their own time as well. So thank you, first of all, for carving out a bit of time in your own schedule to be part of today's activity. We place so much emphasis on time management. I know, for instance, that I've had conversations with some of you either face-to-face or virtually through Cengage's blog or through the community at Cengage, where we've kind of shared ideas and had conversations about time management. And here's some of what we've talked about. Usually, though, our time management strategies focus on student success and the idea that perhaps we can help save our students some time. And while that's valuable and completely important, the real focus today is going to be on saving the instructor some time. So as we think about that concept, this is a question I have for you. Do you think we can add more time to the day? And it's a question I want us to think about because I want to share a little example with you. This has been up for debate at my college. Believe it or not, sometimes instructors and administrators will have a debate about whether or not we can add more time to the day. For instance, I had a colleague who was on a calendar committee trying to determine the number of days that we needed to have instructionally for students and thus the number of hours of instruction that were needed. And at one point during a committee meeting, that colleague said, "We can't add more hours to the day." And it caused everybody to pause and say, "You're right. We can't add more time to the day, but we can use each day's time more effectively." And as an instructor, I have to remind myself of that all the time, whether I'm teaching face-to-face or whether I'm teaching online. There is only so much time that I have with students, and so I have to make the most of that. So I know we have a variety of instructors and experiences on this call, and no matter if you're a rookie instructor and this is your first time teaching, or if you've been a seasoned instructor teaching for many semesters, I want you to answer this quick poll question. And that question is, what takes most of your time? So when you're at work, whether it's sitting in front of a desk, in a classroom, think about what takes up the majority of your time during the day. We have some options for you on the screen, and feel free alternately to add some ideas to the chat. Now, while those ideas are coming in, this is something that may change throughout the semester. For instance, at the beginning of the semester, as an instructor, I'm very busy with committee meetings, organizational meetings, requirements for committees within my department. Those ebb and flow, so now it's mid-semester for me, and I have a lot of grading that I'm doing with my students. So as instructors, I think we all understand too that at different points during the semester, our time gets divided differently. But for you, I'm curious to know what takes most of your time. I'm seeing some fun responses in the chat too. The idea that emailing takes a lot of time, the number of students that we sometimes have per section within a class just takes a lot of our time and responsibility. I see several comments related to grading, whether that's projects, pop quizzes, homework. I see the dreaded committee as a response as well. I think it's quite valuable for us to have this conversation and also know that we're not alone. Lots of things take our time away from actual instruction in the classroom. I'm also glad that some of you are sharing some outside responsibilities too. As instructors, some of us for instance, don't realize that there are instructors who pull additional weight. Some instructors are advisors or in charge of a club. Some have individual responsibilities with students in terms of cohorts, activities, athletics. So yes, lots of varying answers here. Well, let's see what the results are. For the individuals on the call today and this particular Zoom webinar, we're going to put up the results for those of you who did answer in the actual poll question. I think it will be advantageous for us to look at this all together.
Hey, while we wait for the official poll results to be calculated, Audrey, I can read through some more of these responses we've just had come in.
Absolutely.
Email has come up a lot. You mentioned that early on, and since you've mentioned it, I've seen that pop up a few more times. I think that people, jumping on the bandwagon there. They realize email and correspondence in general, especially when you have a lot of students, it takes up a lot of time, and when you're trying to give them valuable responses. Well, hey, look, there's that poll. All right. Now we are seeing the poll results come in. So it looks like grading assignments is up there too, Audrey.
Yeah, and I'm sure that sometimes instructional responsibilities are different, discipline to discipline, or maybe even depending on the time of the year. So I realize this is not an easy question to perhaps just give a single answer to, but thank you for those of you who participated in that. Again, I think it is valuable for us to reassess this. I've been teaching full-time for 15 years, but what took up the majority of my time in years 1 and 2 was course preparation, staying kind of current in my role and learning my role as an educator. What took up the majority of my time in years 5 and 6 is different than what takes up the majority of my time now. So as we continue on today, I want you to reflect on your own experience and how you can adapt some of what we're talking about today to fit your particular needs and or to fit the college and student population that you have. Well, today's talk is divided into 3 different areas. First, we're going to discuss some ways to win back classroom time. And whether you teach online, face-to-face, or hybrid, there are things that you can do more effectively in class to make the most of that precious, precious student time that you have. I think too, in discussing this, one of the things I wanted to share is I was mentoring a new faculty member who was again, a brand new instructor, rookie instructor. And one of his questions was, how do I fill up 3 hours of lecture time per week? And I thought, oh, to feel that again, because for me, 3 hours just flies by now because I know what to do in the classroom. So again, no matter where you are, I think thinking about how you can design the time you have with students is valuable. So one of the first things I want to talk to you about is prioritizing the amount of time that you have in class. Whether it's the beginning of the semester or whether you're at the halfway point, I think it's always valuable to think about what students need at the moment, but what can also wait. And I'll give you a very good example. One of my students came to me on Monday and asked about a letter of recommendation. And I am very happy, always honored, to provide students with a letter of recommendation. But I also had a stack of pop quizzes that I needed to grade. And so though I was very able to help the student, I did say, okay, what is your deadline? I will not be able to get to this today. I may be able to finish this by the end of the week. And it's a very small thing, but it's also a very big thing to get students to understand that priorities need to happen. So I think if we're good models of that with students, that can go a long way towards teaching them that concept as well. So as an instructor, I always think about kind of my Monday schedule and what do I need to take care of today and what could possibly wait. So if you can get in the habit of prioritizing, that's a great start to making the most of your time. I also lean on my students. I have them do some prep work. Of course, I want to stay current in my discipline, and of course, I always want to effectively prepare for class. But one thing that I was telling this new instructor who I was mentoring was that you can get your students to do a bit of the work, and there's always a give and take in that. For instance, as a new instructor, rather than perhaps creating every pop quiz yourself, why not put some of that responsibility on the shoulders of students? Have every student bring a single pop quiz question to class, and then you can collectively use those in a pool as questions for your students. You could also do this online, give students an option to sort of invest in the class. I do use student written scenarios for exams. Sometimes I'll have my students create an example for something. I may alter it slightly for the purposes of an exam question, but don't hesitate to invite your students into the learning process by having them do some work. I also want to grade well-written material. I'm an English instructor, and so I grade lots and lots of essays during the course of the semester. And it is a much more pleasant experience when I get to grade well-written essays. And so I do have my students submit their essays for plagiarism detection in order to not only check for original work, but also to help those students who may border on inadvertent plagiarism. They may be inappropriately using quoted material or not giving proper attribution. And so this is something that I do lean on some software for in order to assist my students with that process. Plagiarism detection, for those of you who have any written assignments, can be used in a number of ways. There are several free plagiarism detection softwares online. You may have some suggestions of which ones work best in the chat. My college has a site license to Turnitin.com, which I like because not only does it check against ebooks, periodicals, and live web pages, but also archived material that may no longer be live. And then I do use for my online classes the MindTap platform, which has built-in Turnitin integration as well. You may also want to check with your college's or with your college's IT department to see if your learning management system has a built-in plagiarism detection. It can be used in any discipline. And then for certain concepts that I teach, I require students to watch something before classroom instruction. To give you a direct example, I do have my students watch a short video on library instruction before I teach research skills in class. That way they know the basics about how to navigate our college's online library. I have a colleague in math who does something similar so that students aren't coming to class sort of blind. They have some basis for understanding what's being covered. So if you do some version of video instruction outside of classwork or have students help prepare some of the class material, that can certainly save class time. I know plenty of instructors too who don't use attendance during class, but they rely on a digital product for that purpose. So if you find that you're spending a lot of time just with the business of the class, kind of getting the class going, taking roll, seeing who's absent, or recording who's tardy, you may think about using some type of digital product to help with that. As a new instructor, I was really reluctant to have my students do group activities. I was never quite sure, for instance, how much class time they would take or how well my students would work in groups. And so I resisted, in my discipline at least, giving students a lot of group activities for my first few semesters of instruction. What I found though is that when I incorporate some group activities throughout the semester, I actually make better use of my class time. And the reason is that some things can be better accomplished in groups than they can in a whole classroom environment. So for instance, if I have my students completing a worksheet, sometimes they're actually more efficiently doing so when they have a partner or a small group. I've also found that small groups facilitate discussion much more quickly than I can get going in a lecture setting. So when I teach a literature class, for instance, I'll frequently do a think, pair, share technique. So I'll ask a question as a way to get students to think about it. And then I'll say, pair up with the person sitting next to you. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes time, and I want you to share your answer to whatever question I've posed. And then I'll square them up. In other words, put them in small groups so that pair becomes a group of 4, and they'll share some ideas together. It can be a wonderful way to generate topics for upcoming projects, for them to discuss a piece of writing, for instance, a poem that may be difficult to analyze on their own. So sometimes group activities like that can work. I do peer editing in class as well for the purposes of getting students to find some of their own errors. That's been an effective group strategy for me. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this will continue. I think as instructors, we do our students a service when we're able to help them interact with one another. So if you don't yet use some group activity because you think it will take away too much class time, I would invite you to rethink that maybe this is the dynamic that students could actually benefit from, and it could be a way to actually speed up some instruction. I've also taken a hack from the elementary school classroom. Who would have guessed that something out of the elementary school classroom playbook would be something that would be effective in my English class? But occasionally I encourage self-checking with students. This is a screenshot you're seeing of an actual quiz that I give to my students in a face-to-face literature class. And as you can see on the screen, the students in this case have read a short story, and then I give them this quick open book assessment to see if they've understood the symbolism of, in this case, something from an Edgar Allan Poe short story. Well, this is a drawing quiz, and my students are always so shocked that they can draw something for a pop quiz. It takes less than 5 minutes time. It's certainly fun for them. It's fun for me. And it's a great motivator for them to see that literature is something that can kind of come alive. It's something for them that we can visualize and talk about too. For a pop quiz like this, it's one question, it's 100 or a 0. And this is something I'll just sort of circulate around the room. I'll see what their drawing's like and say, oh, you got it, great job, or you need to check that page again, that's not quite right. So every once in a while, throwing a curveball at them, like a drawing pop quiz or something that they can simply self-check works. This way I'm not carting a whole collection of pop quizzes to my office to grade, but in every kind of low stakes activity like this, I think there's a little bit of wiggle room where you can let students have a little bit of fun and then let them self-check as a way, again, for a low stakes assignment to possibly earn a score. And then there are plenty of concepts I teach that require some heavy lifting from me. For instance, in teaching freshman writers how to avoid plagiarism, it's something I struggle with truly every semester. Our textbook does a wonderful job of taking students through the process of research writing, and it even includes a flow chart of how they can avoid plagiarism in their own compositions. And I found that there are lots of worksheets I can do with students, but I tell you, the heavy lifting of getting students to understand why plagiarism matters, I found can best be addressed through video. And I have a short video on the screen that we're going to queue up in just a moment, because this is actually something I share with my students. In order to get them to understand why plagiarism matters, and I do this online and I do this face-to-face, I share with students the quick story of the Motown singer from the 1960s, Marvin Gaye, who you're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen, and Robin Thicke, a pop singer whose 2013 single, Blurred Lines, was a hit. Well, I show them this short video to have them question whether or not a recording artist can plagiarize the words, ideas, and rhythm of another artist. This leads us into a discussion of what exactly is plagiarism? Does original content matter? And does it matter outside of the English class? And so by sharing this quick video, it allows us to have that organic discussion. And I'm going to have Courtney help me out here, because she's going to queue up this video for you to hear. We won't watch the whole thing, but it will be a way for you to see what my students experience.
Everybody get up.
Here. Thank you so much, Courtney. One of the ways that I teach students about plagiarism is that I show this video and I let them hear what perhaps has been content that's questionable. And then I share with them that there has been so much made between Marvin Gaye's Gotta Give It Up and Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines that he co-wrote with Pharrell Williams, that a lawsuit was brought against the two co-writers of Blurred Lines. And ultimately, a jury settlement was reached in 2015 that said, yes, there's enough unoriginal content and rhythm here that it seems that Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams did, in essence, plagiarize the work of Marvin Gaye. And the Gaye family was awarded a $7.4 million settlement because of that. Well, this gets them to understand, wow, when we talk about plagiarism, we're not just talking about words on a page, we're talking about people's lives, we're talking about their original creative work. Plagiarism matters in writing, but it also matters in music and so many other places. And then invariably when I share this, I usually have students say, oh, yeah, I remember. You know, I heard something about Taylor Swift, or I heard something about maybe Miley Cyrus hijacking a particular song. And so this leads into other discussions. Well, my point in sharing all of this is to show that as instructors, we certainly have educational knowledge. We have knowledge in our discipline. But in order to share a concept, sometimes a video can do that bit of heavy lifting for us. And so this is a short video that I can show in class that helps make that point, and then also leads to some other discussions. And I see one of our astute participants has said, oh yes, there is a case currently being brought against Miley Cyrus, and that's true. We talked about that last week in class. So oftentimes a short video, you would think, gosh, I'm going to take up so much class time by using this, but truly it again can do a wonderful job in introducing your students to a concept. Well, outside of class time, once you've kind of won some of that back, it can easily be taken up with grading. Depending on what class you teach and what discipline, at what level, you have grading responsibilities that may involve something like daily homework, weekly discussion forum posts, major essays or projects. And I wish I had a magic wand to take all of those responsibilities and make them easier. I don't, but I do have some tips. So one of the ways that you could think about making the most of your grading time is first to manage the paperwork that you have. Full-time instruction for me involves 5 classes. In an English class, our cap is 25 students, so every semester I teach well over 100 students, and just managing that flow of paperwork, essay to essay, assignment to assignment, is a challenge. And so no matter if I'm teaching face-to-face or online, I have students submit work digitally. That just ensures that I don't lose it. I have date and time stamps for everything. So I have gone totally digital in terms of managing my paperwork. And there's some also, or I should say there are also some big advantages to doing that too. Because my students submit work digitally, I can see through a system and track how and when they're reading my responses. So here's a digital hack that I have for you that I developed, and I absolutely love it. It's the idea that using my digital system, I can see when students have viewed my feedback. So for instance, the screenshot that you're seeing in the lower right shows student work that was submitted this semester, and the little green eyeball, when I roll my cursor over that, will show the date and time that a student actually looked at my feedback. What looks like a blackened kind of X mark shows, in this case, that 2 students in this screenshot have not bothered to view my comments at all. And I will usually prompt those students with an email. I'll put up a class announcement or face-to-face, try to hold students back and say, you know, hey, I noticed you haven't yet looked at comments. Are you having any digital problems? But what I also do is any student who hasn't bothered to look at comments after my best efforts to encourage them to do so, I don't spend the time to leave comments on their next paper. So in terms of Essay 1, if a student has only looked at a grade and has not looked at my comments, I simply give them a holistic score on Essay 2. I don't spend the extra time and effort to line item things for them. And I started that technique several years ago, and it's worked wonderfully. it's not that I'm holding back feedback from students at all. In fact, I tell them, although this is your score, if you're now looking at this level of comment, please come see me or set up an appointment to chat with me in my office because you still haven't looked at feedback on Essay 1. I want my students to grow as writers, but they have to be receptive to feedback in order to do that. This technique has saved a lot of time because every semester there are, unfortunately, those students who really don't care about individual feedback on their writing. I wish they did, but some don't. Sometimes they're my best students, as you're seeing from this screenshot from my actual class. Occasionally it's the high-level student who is a sharp writer, who simply doesn't look at feedback. And sometimes it's the lower level students, some students who really do need that extra layer of attention. This particular screenshot is coming from my MindTap course that's integrated with the Turnitin.com gradebook. So if you use a MindTap product and you have access to Insight 2, you'll have this option to see feedback. But also if your institution has a direct Turnitin site license and you use the GradeMark feature, you can see this as well. So again, just a quick reminder for those of you who are asking in the chat, GradeMark in Turnitin will show you this, as will Insight 2 in MindTap. I do want my students to turn in their best work, and I have to prepare them for doing that. So one of the things that I try to do to encourage strongly written final projects and papers is to scaffold my assignments and scaffold my instruction surrounding something. So for instance, if I'm getting them to write a comparison contrast paper, as you're seeing from this screenshot, they get some level of chapter instruction. I show them examples of professional and student writing that they can use as models. We go through self-editing and peer editing. So there's this multi-student layer of review. So hopefully by the time I get their final papers, not always the case, but they've done enough of the work so that I'm getting their very best work. I also do use some level of rubrics depending on my assignment or project. What you're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen is just kind of a quick capture of one that I made in a word processor. I do upload this digitally as well. You can upload this, as I mentioned, in those, well, in multiple platforms. You can upload rubrics to Turnitin.com. You can use them integrated in Insight 2 within MindTap. And many learning management systems have an application or an area where you can add rubrics to. I have colleagues who use rubrics in a lot of different ways. Sometimes colleagues will use rubrics. I have one, for instance, who will just place scores on a rubric and then say, use this to come see me for comments, so that online or face-to-face, a real conversation can happen surrounding an actual score. It sort of depends on the assignment. Sometimes I find it useful for students to get individualized feedback on, for instance, their format, their effectiveness, or their grammar related to writing. And other times, a more holistic approach is called for. Depending on the assignment too, sometimes I don't actually grade it. For instance, I have students who, before they write on a research topic, they have to have topic approval from me. And so I ask them, for instance, in my online class, to post topics that they're interested in and then choose the one that they think they want to write about and research for a paper. So rather than reply with some type of rubric or some type of complicated grading system, I'll simply give them an internet high five and say, okay, you got your high five, you're ready to go, your topic's approved, and you can start the research project. I also will pull in kind of this, this little fun digital fist bump. My students seem to like that. And so every once in a while, there's not something I grade per se, but I do give some type of feedback for. Again, I don't use this for high stakes assignments. This would be some type of level of participation credit. You can create your own little digital symbol, and you can find some at free image sites as well online. So you can have fun with that. And then as instructors, sometimes our voice is really the most valuable form of feedback. I love chatting with students in my office. I love having a face-to-face conversation with them or just a real-time conversation. And sometimes I can say more in a few minutes time in terms of feedback than I can by typing something out to them or completing a rubric. And so there are lots of different ways where you may, or lots of different instances, I should say, where it might be valuable for you to offer some level of audio feedback to your students. In both of the platforms that I've mentioned, Turnitin.com's GradeMark and Insight2 in MindTap, for essays, since again I'm an English teacher, there's an option to add audio comments, and the option there allows 3 minutes of audio time for talking to give feedback on students' writing. There are other platforms that you can use, a lot of free applications as well, to add in audio comments, but this can be really valuable too, especially to have a conversation as I do with writing about strengths and weaknesses with my students. Maybe the idea of sort of walking them through, here's what I'm noticing as a trend in your writing, here's what I'd like you to work on. And sometimes an instructor simply hearing a student's voice can be a powerful way for them to connect with you as an instructor. And then finally, outside of the classroom and outside of our grading responsibilities, the last topic that I'd like to cover with you as well are ways for you to win back some of your time, because we are all people too. And if we don't refill our well as humans, then we're not going to be our best selves in the classroom. So we do need to save time in order to be ourselves. I have learned the power of saying no. And this is something that I think can certainly come with time, but don't hesitate to sometimes say no to responsibilities that are simply a time suck. I also will sometimes say no to a student in order to get them through a learning curve. So for instance, if it's the second paper and a student comes to me and says, Ms. Wick, I want your feedback on my opening paragraph. Sometimes I'll say, I won't do that until we've gone through the peer editing process in class. Okay, no now, but let's do this. Or I'd like you to visit a tutor at our on-campus writing center. Or hold that, because next week in class we're going to be covering how to write an effective academic introduction. So sometimes no can be your best friend. I do encourage my students to use outside resources, and the first few years that I was an instructor, I tell you, I didn't really know what was available to my students digitally. I didn't know about a lot of support services, and I thought, well, gosh, as an instructor, if I don't know about this, my students don't know about this either. So I do direct students to the library for research instruction. Our college has a wonderful online function called Chat with a Librarian that students can use anytime I'm not available. I'm certainly, I have no expertise as a librarian. I answer research questions, of course, for students, but I like to show them that librarians are available to answer those questions. So I do direct students to library staff, learning center staff, writing center staff, computer technicians. If you are a new instructor and you're not familiar with what your college may offer to students, please ask and seek out that information so that you can share that appropriately. And then this is a tough one, but we all have to have personal time. Just like my students need time to decompress, I do too. And so I teach online, but I can't make myself available 24 hours a day. And so I do tell my students on weekends, I will reply to your messages, but I may not reply within 24 hours. I set those expectations to my students at the beginning of the semester. I have language towards that in my syllabus and in my frequently asked questions folder of my online class. I do have to set those parameters for students. And then I also make technology kind of work in that regard. For instance, although I'm not available 24 hours a day, I do create a discussion forum called Questions About This Week. and I place that in every one of our weekly folders online. So if students have a general question that maybe somebody else in class can answer, they're free to post it there. And I found that those questions create a wonderful, or that space for questions, create a wonderful group dynamic. I'm also pleasantly surprised how accurate the answers are. Many of my students who happen to be online, for instance, when one student asks a question, will jump in and say, oh, just to give you a concrete example, how many sources do we need for essay 2? I'm not clear about that from something, and another student will jump in. 3, remember, oh, she sent this email about this. Yeah, it's 3 sources. Please go and look at that. And so that's always very helpful too. And then do what you can to minimize student questions at the beginning of the semester. So whether it's working in some language to your syllabus, whether it's setting up a frequently asked questions folder online, whether it's just clarifying things now and again throughout the semester regarding your expectations. I think that's really valuable. So keep that going, set those expectations, and I think that certainly is better for everyone, yourself included. So we may not have been able to, I know we haven't been able to fully wave a magic wand and save you lots of time, but I hope by looking at ways to win back a little bit of your time, thinking through some ways to save time in terms of grading, and then also thinking about ways to carve out class time and let videos or other students do some of the heavy lifting, that you feel a little bit more confident with the time that you do have as an instructor. Your time is so valuable, and I want to thank you for sharing your time with us today. And now let's have a little bit of fun, because instructors need that too. So Courtney, why don't we tell the participants in our conversation today about this cool Picture Your Free Time social media campaign, mid-semester fun, I'm not quite sure what we're calling it, that we have going on with Cengage.
Picture your free time. And I would love nothing more than to talk about it. Audrey, thank you so much for walking through those great tips. You can tell these are resonating with a lot of the people that we have here on the call. And I've seen a lot of other great ideas come in through chat as well. So thanks for sharing those ideas. Please feel free to continue sharing those ideas in our higher ed faculty community. We've posted the link in the chat, but I will do that again here before we end today, so that everyone can keep finding ideas and keep sharing ideas. As Audrey mentioned, we do have a program running right now that we wanted to mention because it's so relevant to what Audrey is talking about today. So now you have some great tips to help you save some time. This sweepstakes program asks, what would you do with that free time if you had it? Or what are you doing with the free time that you have gained using these tips, using digital tools? So simply through this sweepstakes here, I pasted a link in the chat. Share a picture and a caption telling us what you would do with that free time. And you could win a $50 gift card. So it only takes a couple minutes and you could win a gift card. Definitely worth it. And now I'd like to go ahead and start the Q&A portion of the presentation. So let me see here.
Great. And Courtney, while that's queuing up, there are a couple of things that you can do. If you have a question for me about anything that I mentioned, a particular digital tool, a technique, or if you have a comment that I can share for the benefit of everyone, if you want to put that in the chat window, we will look at that. There's also an actual Q&A window. And then if you would like to continue the conversation long after today, do check out Cengage's community. It's cengage.community.com. Is that right?
That is, I will actually post the link in here.
Great. Pull that link in there for folks. But the community is a place where higher education instructors can share ideas. There's a variety of people who use digital products, who can answer user questions. There's wonderful ideas for incorporating news articles and social media trends and new ideas into teaching. It's also a safe place to go to ask questions. So if you are a rookie instructor and you just have questions about course management or ideas for creating kind of a fun, engaging pop quiz, you can connect with people within your discipline too. So the community through Cengage is a wonderful digital space for you to explore.
It really is. It really is. And Audrey is there frequently and shares lots of great ideas there. So you can find more.
Well, I get lots of great ideas too. So my time is valuably spent there.
It goes both ways in the community, right? That's
absolutely, right. Absolutely. Yeah, there's one question I did see come into the chat that I would like to address. One participant asked about ADA compliance using some digital tools, and that is such an appropriate question to ask. You know, the more we use digital tools, we do have to remember that maybe not everybody has the same capabilities, and we may have some students with disabilities who are not able to use certain tools. So that is certainly a valuable question to consider. I don't use audio feedback, for instance, with students who would who have a documented disability where that is not something that that they can do for. So if I know of a disability with a student, I will of course not use something that would be to their detriment. If you use, for instance, a YouTube video, there is a closed captioned feature. And in MindTap, if you incorporate a video there or use a video that's in the repository, those are all closed captioned. And so even deaf students will be able to learn from those. So I think we just have to make smart decisions about our student population and always consider that no matter what type of tool we might be using.
Thank you, Audrey, for commenting on that. It's a good question that we had come in through chat.
It is, and you know, sometimes we may not know that information on day one of the class, but when it comes time to grading assignments or offering meaningful feedback after a project, usually at that point that comes a little later in the semester. So we would know our student population by then.
Great, good point, Audrey. We have had a few questions come in through the Q&A feature as well, and I want to invite everyone, if you have any other questions for Audrey, please feel free to send those in. This question came on a little bit earlier in the presentation, Audrey, when you were talking about considering some group activities. So it seems like, the question is, it seems like so many classes are going online, making it more difficult to do group activities. Do you have any ideas for online group activities other than discussions?
Well, yes. I mean, you can get pretty creative with discussions. But we also have to remember that a lot of online students are taking online classes because they don't have the ability to meet real time. So discussions are actually a very good thing because those don't have to happen in real time. So I don't want an instructor to totally discount that. One way, though, that I do group activities is through pairing. And we may not always think of partnering students or having them participate in a peer editing process as something that's group related, but it is. They're still participating in the process of giving and receiving feedback. And so if you can pair students through email, if you can set up a paired group through your discussion board, or I use a peer editing option with my essay submissions. And it's a rolling option, so students are giving and receiving feedback to 2 other students. That gives them exposure in kind of that group environment. And sometimes we even have to rethink what we think of in terms of groups. For instance, it may be valuable to have students work with some member of support staff. So if your campus has a writing center or you have a digital library, do encourage your students to reach out through chat functions or tutoring sessions there, because that is still a way for them to get some type of outside feedback and incorporate that. So it's challenging online, of course it is. But I think if you can kind of rethink your definition of groups, consider pairing students as well, that those can be good avenues.
Thanks, Audrey. So it's really, I mean, a lot of this is possible still in an online environment. It's just about thinking about it a little differently. Using
it is.
Differently.
Yeah.
There was a question about the rubric that you shared earlier. If you can share that with attendees, if you're willing to, maybe that's something we could post.
Why not? Some of my best ideas have come from other instructors. Yeah, I'll happily go back to it. I was using that in a writing class, and so the 4 areas that were shown were specific to things like MLA format and grammar, but absolutely adapt it. I think the option that I can share, I just have it in a word process document. That's probably easier than trying to share a file that I've made through my digital product. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. And Courtney, I'll visit with you and we'll get that out to folks, and you can adapt it. Don't even have to credit me. But yeah, if you want to use that rubric, please. And ask other instructors too. Don't hesitate to ask at your college because many instructors are very happy to share things like that. So especially if you're a rookie instructor, work up that courage and ask from those who have been in the game a little bit longer what they use or why they like a certain type of rubric, and seek that feedback too. But I'm happy to share for sure.
Thank you, Audrey. There's one question from Judith is curious. Do you have Tegrity?
Oh, yes.
In her
yes.
course.
I have used that, and our librarians have used that. Our librarians have created short Tegrity instructional videos for students. And the first time I used Tegrity, I was so nervous. I flubbed my language. I thought, oh, my face is going to be frozen. My first few videos weren't very good, and my students didn't care. My students were happy to hear a voice. They were happy to see that I was a live individual. So I've used Tegrity, and I've got over the fright that I had of being on camera for them. Did the participant have a particular question about its use, Courtney?
No, I think it was just a suggestion for everyone. She's curious to know if you use it. So
Yeah.
see, everybody has their own little tools that they use in their course. So this is really good to be together and be able to share those.
Yeah, I mean, today I'm on a simple webcam on my computer, but Tegrity, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a lecture capture software. So in addition to the webcam, you can do kind of what we're doing on this call, where you can be part of the conversation. You can have a live video, and then you can show slides or a website. So Tegrity is a wonderful way for you to do lecture capture, where you show your face to students through audio and video, and then you show them some content too. One tip I have for using Tegrity is do not make those videos too long. Keep in mind that students' attention spans are maybe not online what they are sometimes in the classroom. So I do kind of chop up my video instruction that way.
Great. Thank you, Audrey, for that additional advice about Tegrity. We are actually over time today, so this is great. We had such a great discussion that, we had questions. We are going a little bit past time, but we will close it out now. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us, post them in the community. We can get answers for you. Feel free to share those ideas as well. We have been seeing great comments come in through chat. I have seen a couple questions about the recording of this webinar. We will have this. This has been recorded, and we will have it available on our Empowered Educator site within the next couple days. So you'll receive an email with the link to that. We will also be, in that email, you'll also receive a survey link to let us know what you thought about this event. We would love your feedback so that we can keep improving these events, feature topics that are relevant to you, and just improve that experience. So I did post the link a few times in the chat, but I think there were some errors with it. So I'm posting it again now. I think that last one should work fine, but you'll also receive that via email. So if you can just take a few moments, let us know what you think. We'd really appreciate it. As we mentioned a few times, we do have the Cengage Higher Ed faculty community, so please feel free to visit there. Enter the sweepstakes program with your picture and your caption about your free time. Maybe you'll win a gift card. But I want to thank all of you for joining us today for our Empowered Educator webinar. And again, Audrey, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Oh, I love talking with colleagues. So thank you, thank you. Go out and be empowered. Save some time too while you do it. Thanks, everybody.
On that, have a great day. Thank you.